And I'd also like to thank Rotary. Firstly, thank you for coming and holding your meeting here today. We really appreciate your support. And secondly, I was at the auction on Saturday night. And Jim and Elizabeth and all of you, my hat is off to you for a very successful evening. You really know how to do it right. And you are a model, an inspiration for the rest of us. So I'd like to just start with a little bit of background on the United Nations, because if you're anything like me, when you think of the UN, you think of them in their peacekeeping role. And I'm going to put my glasses on. I used a really big font, thinking I wouldn't have to do this, but okay. International peace and security is certainly one of the fundamental objectives of the UN, but it's part of a much larger mandate. The UN was established in 1945. Following World War II, there were 51 member states in 1945. And as a point of interest, in addition to governments, a number of non-government organizations, including Rotary International, received invitations to assist in the drafting of the original charter. So, Rotary was there from the very beginning. Today, there are 193 member states. The UN meets in the General Assembly, which is the closest thing we have to a world parliament. Each country, large or small, rich or poor, receives one vote. The UN headquarters is in New York City, but the land and the buildings are international territory. As another point of interest, prior to the choice of New York City, Navy Island, near Niagara Falls in Canada, was proposed as the site for the headquarters for the United Nations. But in the end, Rockefeller bought 18 acres along the East River in Manhattan and donated it to the UN, and so the headquarters were built there. The UN has its own flag, its own fire department, its own security force, its own post office, its own postage stamps. There are 6 official languages of the UN. Just inside the perimeter fence of the complex stands a line of flagpoles. I think everybody's familiar with that image. And that's where the flags of all 193 UN member states, plus the UN flag, are flown in English alphabetical order. One day I was wandering past and there was a whole bunch of people lowering the flags. I thought something had happened. That was bad. So I asked the security guard, and he said, no, the flags are only raised when the members are in Congress in the General Assembly, and then they are raised every morning at 8:30 and lowered every evening at 4:30. The various commissions, such as the one I attended on the status of women, while part of the UN system, they're separate, autonomous, intergovernmental organizations. The UN commissions have been held since 1960, and they are the forums for deciding on international policy that affect every nation and transcend national boundaries. So, for instance, issues such as refugee populations, organized crime, gender equality, environmental sustainability, AIDS, those kinds of things fall under the commission forum. The commissions are where non-government organizations can voice their concerns alongside those of government. As Judy mentioned, I was one of 4 delegates from Canada. I'll just quickly tell you about my colleagues because they were pretty amazing. Amber Fletcher is a PhD student from Saskatchewan, and earlier this spring, Amber received a Governor General's Youth Award in recognition of her work in promoting equality of women and girls in Canada. And Amber was the very first person in Canada to receive the Person's Award for Youth. So she's a pretty awesome young lady. Shannon Joseph is from Ontario, and she is a policy advisor with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And prior to joining FCM, she worked in advocacy at the United Nations on a range of policy issues, including women and girls. And Marie Kenny is from PEI. Marie is a Baptist minister by profession and is the president-elect of the Federated Women's Institute of Canada, or as we know it, WI, and the 4th delegate was myself. And I'm sure the question that everybody asked is, well, why Judy? And it was the first question I asked when I received a call and was asked to put in a nomination. But as Judy mentioned, the theme this year was rural women, agricultural production, and eradicating poverty through local food production. And you must be an NGO to qualify to go to these commissions. And so based on those things, I guess I qualified to go. So the very first thing upon arrival was getting our security passes, because of course we couldn't enter the grounds until we had security clearance. And this was accomplished amazingly fast, in my opinion, seeing as there was 5,000 or 6,000 delegates to the commission, but it still entailed a 3-hour wait. But there's always a good thing, and I waited in line with Francois Beauvin, Member of Parliament for Gatineau, and the NDP official critic for the status of women. So that was, debating policies. Some of you might know, debating policies on for national political parties with her made the time go by very quickly for me. Everyone's security pass looked the same, but they were coded differently, so they would allow you into some buildings but not into others. And our passes gave us clearance to wherever we wanted to go. I should mention that in addition to the 5,000 or 6,000 official delegates representing the UN countries, there were any number, and I would guess thousands and thousands of women that came to New York to be part of the commission and to provide their input into the process. Now, these representatives are not provided with the security passes into the UN proper, and so they hold their meetings in close proximity, but near the UN buildings. So we started each day at 8 a.m. with a briefing at the Canadian mission, and this was just basically allowing the mission staff an opportunity to bring us up to date on anything we needed to know, to tell us if there was anything required of us that day, and anything new that that wasn't in our briefing books. And we, the delegates, the 4 of us, also shared what sessions we were planning to go to that day. And then that was it. We were on our own until 8 a.m. the next morning. So at any given time during the week, there was a high-level panel presentation occurring, and this consisted of 4 to 6 speakers, generally the heads of government, speaking about a particular issue and how their country is addressing it. And that would be followed by questions or comments from the floor. Additionally, there would be a minimum of 4 side sessions occurring, and what they call side sessions, which were other just big forums. And then there would be dozens of sessions off-site hosted by the NGOs on topics of particular importance to the NGO host group. The sessions ran from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then from 3 to 6 p.m. And between 1 and 3 daily, it was our responsibility to meet with the Canadian NGOs to bring them information on what was being said in the high-level panels or the side sessions and to hear back from them. So these Canadian NGOs were holding meetings throughout the day, and in most cases they were drafting statements or suggesting word changes to the proposed resolution. So then we would take those recommendations and statements back to the mission staff, working on Canada's input into the resolution. In the evenings, there were events hosted by different countries, and we could choose which event we wanted to attend. Again, our passes gave us entry into anything we wanted to go to. The evening events were working sessions also, albeit they were far less formal than the sessions during the day, and at night there was wine. And often food, and I have to admit that we found very little time to eat, so whenever there were snacks, we were there. And the commission ran for 2 weeks. The first week consisted of the high-level panels and the side sessions, and the second week was when the resolutions were debated. During the first week, I attended a lot of sessions on the topic of food and agriculture. And to give you just a sense of the kinds of things that were discussed, in developed countries like Canada, the discussion would include urban-rural migration, pay equity, reducing gender stereotyping, topics like that. But most of the discussion centered on issues in the developing countries. And I heard issues such as access to land and property rights. This is huge on a world scale. Access to microcredit. In developing countries, financial exclusion is pervasive. The linkage between food and poverty, the lack of market access for products, and the recognition that the ability to produce food, not have access to sufficient food, but to produce food, is a major factor in eradicating poverty. In the developing countries, it is recognized that rural women are the economic producers, and the vast majority, this surprises me, the vast majority of women in the world make their living in agriculture. But their yield, their production is very labor intensive and produces low yields, low returns. There's rarely surpluses. Women lack recognition as farmers. Therefore, they lack access to resources like bank loans or credit to allow purchase of seed or fertilizers or other essential equipment. Women lack time and are often required to have dual and triple jobs, and I'm speaking here about non-paid jobs. Wife, mother, food producer, all household responsibilities, and often the expectation that they will be an income producer. And women assume these roles in their young teen years. Women are not the recipients of the income of their labor. If in the unlikely situation there is a surplus and a sale is made, women are not able to keep the profits to invest back into production or even into their children and their households. There was a quote one day on one of the screens in a high level that kind of resonated with me. It stated, farmers occupy perhaps the most important profession in the world. Why? Many people do not and cannot produce food to feed themselves, while farmers can feed everyone. And just as another point of interest, I recently read, and I'm not quite sure I quite believe this, but I recently read that Canada is one of only 6 countries in the world that feed more than themselves. And that's a rather sobering thought. I also attended a range of sessions dealing with issues such as body image. I mention this one because it was one of the most fascinating and one of the most disturbing sessions I attended. Especially considering that most of this is self-imposed. Body image is a very lots of very big business worldwide, and the success of this business model is based on the solution's failure to work. You know, I'm talking about diets, cosmetics, body size, body reconfiguration, the optimal for that. I've heard that in some countries it is unusual for a girl to reach the age of 5 without having had Botox treatments. And some of the body improvement methods used in the countries where there isn't money for these kinds of treatments can be life-threatening, such as pervasive use of bleach to whiten skin and those kinds of things. In all countries, developed and developing, there is an enormous pressure on girls and women to conform to a media prescribed body image. And in many countries, the way a woman looks is her only measure of worth. I attended several sessions on the role of men and boys because the attitude of men and boys in eliminating violence against women is key. Some countries have come up with very innovative programs, and I'll just give you an example of India and Pakistan. In India and Pakistan, the government and the NGOs have come together on a program that they call Ring the Bell. If a man is passing in the street and he hears violence happening within a home, screaming, beating, yelling, he is asked to go and ring the bell or knock on the door. If the door is answered, he just simply asks for directions, saying he has lost his way. It is hoped that this is enough of an interruption to allow the woman or the girl to flee to safety. It is also hoped that it is giving the message that others are watching and that his actions are not condoned. I also heard from young girls what it is like to be forced into marriage at the age of 10 or 12 to men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and older. Actually, some of the most impressive people I heard speak at the UN were young girls, teenagers, some as young as 10. And I wondered to myself, how did you get here? Like, who found you? And it was so interesting to me that it was actually one of the threads that I did follow to find out who did find these girls. And I could go on for hours about the topic, but I think you get the tone of what the sessions were like. The second week was when the slates got rolled up and the resolutions were debated. And you might think that this is a boring week because policy isn't everybody's idea of a good time. But not at all. It was totally fascinating to me. These resolutions are debated word by word and then paragraph by paragraph because, as you can well imagine, words mean different things in different countries. I went into these sessions. They were called informals, expecting the words missing. But I didn't expect there would be agreement with the intent. The resolutions were topics like working towards the elimination of HIV/AIDS, or reducing maternal mortality, or the elimination of female genital mutilation, many topics like that. issues that simply, in my mind, could not be disagreed with. Well, I was wrong. I was wrong. Lots and lots and lots of countries disagreed, and none of the resolutions, to my knowledge, passed. And that was a real eye-opener for me. It's never what you think that drives people. So what are the major lessons learned? Well, actually more than you can imagine. I'm really quite embarrassed to admit my naivety. But mostly because we see the world every day. On television, through other media, we see the issues. We're not privy to the details. This was the very first time I was in a space with people where those problems were real, and the details were very sobering. I'll just give you 4 of the insights I came home with. First and foremost, when we were born in Canada, or were given the opportunity to live our lives in Canada, we won the lottery. I'm not suggesting that everything's perfect here. We have a lot to work on and a lot to improve upon. But righting wrongs in Canada is achievable. And on a world scale, they face a much harder task. The United Nations is very impressive and it's very important. However, I learned that decision-making within the UN system is not easy. It requires a complex, often slow process of consensus building that can go on for years. I learned that it was not the organizations I would have expected that were making the biggest difference in the lives of women and girls throughout the world. And I came back resolved to take a much closer look at the role of a number of organizations active in Canada, including Because I Am a Girl Foundation, Plan Canada, and surprisingly to me, maybe not to you, but surprisingly to me, Girl Guide. 4, I learned that politics and policy can provide the guidelines, and truth be told, you would be very hard-pressed to find a member country of the UN that hasn't declared most of the practices against women and girls illegal. But at the ground level, in the communities, it's not about politics, and it's not about policies. It's not about righting wrongs. It's about history, and it's about culture and traditions, and it's primarily about religion. It's about power and control and those ideologies tied within the religions and traditions at the community level. Finally, what were some of the fun things that happened? Because we did have a lot of laughs. My top 10 pick in no order. I got to address a high-level panel in the UN General Assembly. This was complete with sitting in Canada's chair, flag up. Having my voice heard by 5,000 people from around the world, because this was on the first day, and it was the first high level, so everyone was in the assembly, so that was pretty cool. Second, sitting in the UN General Assembly, listening to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. That was really pretty cool as well. Third, I was invited to and went on my first march ever across the Brooklyn Bridge to recognize International Women's Day. Annually on International Women's Day, I wasn't aware of this, but women and men around the world walk across bridges, and it's called the Building Bridges Walk. So Brooklyn Bridge, London Bridge, San Francisco Bridge, Stockholm, bridges throughout Asia, Africa, all over the world. My colleague from PEI in 2013 is going to organize a walk across the Confederation Bridge. And that'll probably attract a lot of attention because it'll probably be the longest one in the world. She said the Confederation Bridge was 13 or 14 kilometers long. 5, I got to have my picture taken standing behind the podium, you know, the one you see on television where the president or other world leaders make their address. Not sure it was completely allowed, but we were a little lost and there was nobody in the room, so we took it. And then we left there, and we were a little bit late, and so we thought we'd take the stairwell, and we got locked into the stairwell in the main building of the UN. We thought there was no handles on the inside of the doors once you got into the stairwell, and so that was interesting. We had dinner next door to the restaurant President Obama was holding a fundraiser in. Now that in and of itself isn't interesting, really, but the streets were closed in a 4-square block around the restaurant, and somehow we didn't notice. And nobody stopped us. And so We did notice that the city that never sleeps was pretty quiet that night, but we were told afterwards that we may have been in sniper rifle sight as we're walking along, pressing our noses against the windows, and they were probably saying, "Oh, they're so stupid Canadians." We got to play tourist, not so much the first week, but in the second week we had some time, and New York is definitely a city I would go back to. We have lots of things happening here, but boy, that city is on 24/7, and it's very fascinating. I was there during what is called March Madness, and this is apparently when the entire U.S. population goes basketball crazy. And yes, our American says yes. And there was a team staying in the hotel I was in, and it's one thing to know intellectually that they're 7'4" and taller, and I know this because I asked one of them. And the shortest guy on the team was 7'4". And then it's a whole other thing to be on an elevator with 5 of them. They have to stand on the elevator like that. And number 10, it is the first time I've spent 2 weeks away where my mind, my conversations, my activities, everything was completely and totally removed from my everyday reality. It was an amazing experience on any level, on every level, and I feel very honored to have been given the opportunity. So thank you very much. I don't know if I've left any time for questions, but I would certainly be willing to take questions now or...
Well, unfortunately, we do have to wrap up.
Yeah.
That's my fault. I went on. But you can stay around for a few minutes after.
Oh, I can.